Welcome back, DigiDs, to another episode of Kerbal Space Program 2. And to those of you who are reoccurring viewers and have been coming back to the channel, you might be telling or asking yourself right now, like, hey, what's going on here? This is a little bit different. This is odd. What's going on? You're going way too fast. I can't follow any of this. And you know what? I apologize, but you're right. So, I don't know, I've been kind of messing around a little bit with editing and trying to get along with more with my tools, and you know, honestly, you get done recording some of these sessions, and this recording alone was about like 95 minutes in total when I tried to cut everything down and take parts away and fast forward some sections a little bit more than others. And you know, and I don't think that's just very feasible to keep on releasing these videos that are an hour long or even 40 minutes long and etc. So I figured, you know, I've actually seen a lot of other Kerbal, you know, how do you say, just Kerbal YouTubers, people like Matt Lone, or even sometimes Scott Manley, or oh, I know there are probably a lot of other big names I'm just can't really think of right now. Everyday Astronaut, which I believe Tim Dodd. Did I already say that? I don't know. I'm already rambling on. But you know, sometimes it takes so long to try to get some of these rockets and designs correct and right that, you know, you can't really have a whole lot of interesting dialogue even while it's happening trying to design the rocket. Like, because I found originally I was trying to do some commentary for the first like 15 minutes, and I just found the entire time I was just like, and then so we put this part here, and then so we're gonna need another part here, all right, now we're gonna need this part here, and you know, it just wasn't very it just wasn't very interesting, and it kind of just occurred to me, I just kind of fell off, but then it kind of occurred to me, like, you know what, hey, I think this is probably going to take a while to design. How about I actually take my time, which I think was kind of refreshing in a sense. And actually, real quick, you can actually tell a real, at this moment, I found where the color changer is down there in the very bottom. You can change the color of your entire rocket. Now, I only meant to do a single part, but I accidentally did the entire rocket. I'll have to figure that out later, as well as I couldn't figure out a way to get rid of it until I kind of clicked around and did some other settings. Yeah, but you know, it kind of just occurred to me that, you know, I've seen a lot of other people do this. You know, I as well can just kind of, I hate to call it almost like a copycat. It sounds copy-ish, but in a way I just find it efficient, right? Because, you know, like I said, it was a lot of footage and you have a lot to show, and you could maybe make like probably 10 or 12 different jump cuts of all the parts that you think might be interesting. Or you could just honestly just show the entire footage, but just fast forward it, because they went from like, you know, some that was like 90 to 85, you know, times 4, and some more parts more faster than others, and now it's going to be around 22 or something along the lines, and I think it's still kind of going along with what you can still follow. And actually, let's take a look at what we are even designing here today. So what we are trying to accomplish is that we really want to build a big satellite relay system. Now, to those of you that maybe watched the KSP episode 1 that I recently released about 2 days ago at this point, you would know that I did something very similar to this, except it was a lot more efficient. Kerbal Space Program 1 is a lot more refined at this point. It's been out for a long time. Makes sense, right? But that one actually worked very well. Now, in this design, I'm not exactly sure how well it was going to go originally trying to design this whole thing. For the most part, we haven't had any issues running this game whatsoever. You've seen some of, you know, me fly around with the planes and the jets with lots of wheels and lots of different like stabilizers and different parts that kind of go along with that whole vehicle, and even all the aerodynamics and flying through the atmosphere and whatnot. And I even had a small rocket that I built that attached to it, you know, well, I put rockets on the wings, so I suppose I built a rocket. I mean, if you put a rocket on something, the whole thing becomes a rocket, right? The vessel itself is the rocket. The center only becomes a plane when the rocket's detached, because there is no longer a rocket, there is only plane. But I guess that's besides the point. What I'm really getting at here is I've forgotten the point. But that's okay. So we're taking a look at the vessel here. I'm sorry, DigiDs. That is about probably the perfect description of how my personality and life goes on the daily. It is an adventure at all times. Not always in a good way, but hey, you learn, and you laugh it off, I suppose. I'm just blabbering on at this point, but I was at this point trying to actually build the fairing, right? Now I came to an issue where the fairing has a kind of a big collision box for some reason. KSP2, you can't get so specifically exactly on the tip of these satellite dishes like you could before. And like in KSP1, like honestly, you can even have the tips poking through the fairing in some points, which was kind of funny. You could have a whole bunch of antenna like this, and it just looked like a porcupine with like random antenna points sticking out of the fairing, which I don't know if actually what counted as being covered or not. Was never determined if it was true. But the fairing, it's a little weird on how they do it now. Before, it was just kind of intuitive that it followed your mouse wherever you just dragged it, and you could click to place a part there. It was pretty simple, but now they have you doing this arrow drag system, which is a little odd. I mean, it's not too hard to get a hang of. Like, once you understand what you're doing, it's all right. But I kind of prefer like that just following the mouse system. But in the end, I don't think it's gonna save the monstrosity that is this fairing. It is something else. I tell you what, it. You have to cover all the satellites, and it'll probably be good enough to cover the whole rocket below it then too. But yeah, the entire thing was a bit of an adventure, and so you can already tell that it's taken a while to build this rocket as we watch it go along. I was personally trying to kind of hurry up about it. I wasn't trying to be like super fast. I was being more relaxed and having fun with it, but not like in the sense of like, oh, let me go get a drink of water, leave this pause in here so I'll just edit it out later. You know, I was just trying to actually get along with it and do what I need to do, and it still took quite a while, and this is, remind you, on ×4. So it's all going pretty quick. Now, it'll be really interesting when we actually get to see this rocket launch, because the performance is something that is very noteworthy at this point. Again, I understand it is very early access, and honestly, I'm kind of upset with a lot of the other, you know, social influencers per se, other YouTubers and Twitter and whatnot, and some people have just been mad at the fact that sometimes when you build these big rockets that the performance is kind of very subpar, to put it very simply. But honestly, I think that's fine. Again, this is so early access that we only have like 7 kinds of like every part, when like we know that they're trying to forward over a lot of the parts from Kerbal Space Program 1 into KSP2. I know that some parts are not all necessarily compatible, but they are, because I guess they've been saying that not all parts are, you know, transitioning as easily, as simply, so they're trying to move a lot of those parts over, but they still have a whole different game to work on here. And honestly, I think they just wanted to get out this whole system right here, because I feel, in my sense, that the greater sense of the Kerbal Space Program community, and you know, you guys can feel free to leave your comments down below on this topic. I feel most Kerbal Space Program community players in general are pretty understanding about this. It's Kerbal, right? We know it's janky. We know it has Kraken. We know it's been in development a long time. We know this is a different company now, but still kind of underneath private division. I forget how that whole situation is, but they're trying a new direction with it. They have a lot to uphold from the last one. And to be fair, people, I think, have just forgotten what Kerbal Space Program 1 went through. You know, KSP1 itself had a lot of issues when it first, you know, came out as well. You know, I don't remember if it had an early access, but when it, I mean, I guess the whole thing for a long time was early access. I remember playing it in its heydays, and it was a lot simpler. It really was kind of almost felt like a mobile game, you know, where you just kind of put some parts together and launch it and fly away, you know, something you could do on your phone almost. It was that simple. But then it kind of, as it evolved, it got, you know, just a lot more complicated and a lot more, you know, parts and aerodynamics, and you have to try a little bit harder and a little bit more controls and commands that you have to do that you wouldn't be able to ever do on a phone. I don't think it ever had a mobile version. I don't know why I'm going on about that, but point being is that it's gone through a lot of iterations in itself too. Right, so I think we have to just give it a modest amount of time to understand that, you know, hey, and actually, I'm sorry that I'm even rambling on about this. I'm not even paying attention to the footage. I remember there was a commenter specifically who was asking on one of the first Kerbal Space Program 2 videos that I did. I think maybe it was the first one we did, like the first try to make a plane. They commented that they wanted to see a wing fly. Well, right now this is quite literally the epitome of getting a wing to fly. I mean, we missed it a little bit there in the back, but like it was, the wing was flying. It was doing it all on its own, completely separated, and there's a lot of weird Krakens and bugs going on. You know, I go on the whole tirade of talking about like how we have to give it time, but honestly, I kind of love all this, the silliness that's happening in the background. I don't love the frame issues, which, you know, I gave you a little bit of a, which you saw a little bit earlier when I was talking about how it has, you know, some problems, but it honestly, it does fine for the most part. I think it's just once you kind of get through the bulk of your main rocket, of course, as you get rid of your parts, it kind of course gets a little bit better as you get further away from them. They aren't have to be loaded in anymore. But, you know, it's been a really fun experience playing this game still, and I wanted to build this, and it was just a little bit too hard to give commentary this entire time. But hey, you know, looking at these rockets, and it really just kind of ignites my passion, pun intended, as we lift off here. It really ignites my passion to what we have, like what we have going on currently in terms of the space race of, in general. Like we have SpaceX currently, you know, here in America, and it is honestly astounding on what they have been able to achieve. Like, I know that recently, like, there's been a lot of news about the new Starship, because Starship 25, they thought it was going to go to the graveyard, and instead of like went to their new like mass testing site. We thought maybe it's just going to be like a test dummy, which in a sense is what is mostly going to be. It's like, it's kind of a test dummy. Like, they're already up to booster 27, I believe, at this point, or Starship 27. But they're probably going to use 25 with like the new testing site to just run any familiarity like components of like from 27 to 25 through those systems and see how they compare and how they act. It's all, they just like testing things, and they figured that if they're gonna scrap it, they may as well maybe accidentally blow it up, because then at that point it's already scrapped for you, right? You know, at least you can tell where it failed and maybe learn something from it. But who knows what they're gonna actually do with it afterwards. It's just kind of speculation. I mean, I know Ship 26 is already coming out early in the week, or I think it had, yeah, it did have a cryo test recently. It went to their cryo stand and it had a small test, and it did all right. You know, it's just kind of got a little icy at the bottom ring of the stack, and nothing too much happened. No huge venting systems or nothing. It just kind of frosted up and went away. I know Booster 7 and Ship 24 are trying to, those are going to be the ones that are actually going to be stacked on top of one another, you know, actually forming the giant Starship system. So Booster 7 and Starship 24, I believe, are the ones that are going to be going for the actual orbital test, right? So for those of you who are unfamiliar with what Starship actually is, it is essentially a giant silver grain silo of a rocket of stainless steel that is going to go up into the atmosphere. You know, it's a rocket, but it is humongous. It is the largest rocket ever built, or the tallest, I believe. It might be a little bit shorter than another one, but it is absolutely massive, right? It is just a giant beast of a thing. So it goes up, detaches. The main booster part, the main booster that, you know, detaches from the, you know, the core center, comes all the way back. It burns itself back in orbit, goes back to the landing site, and is supposed to land in some giant catching arms. So first of all, landing rockets is already kind of weird, and the only people who really do that successfully at this point is SpaceX. A couple of other companies are trying, and some are even doing ones by catching a parachute on the rocket, but none of them really necessarily compare. But in taking a look in the background, another example of one of the, you know, the glitches, for some reason the rocket just completely just said I failed, and I need to learn how to quick save more often. But so yeah, Starship is honestly, it's gonna go up. It's a giant silver grain style huge rocket, right? So when it comes back into the atmosphere, though, you would think that it'd come in like engine first, right? It's a rocket coming down like a dart almost. You know, like maybe you have like a flame shield on the bottom to protect it. No. So what they're doing is that they're coming in completely belly first with these tiny like little, I mean, they're huge, you know, to us, but relatively to the rocket, these tiny little flaps are going to be able to just float the whole belly straight into the atmosphere, handle the heat tiles on one side, and then they're going to just kind of, yeah, belly flop into it to get the most of their deceleration out of it, right? So that kind of decelerates it the most. But then right before it hits the ground, okay, so it's coming in belly first, how's it supposed to land? So it takes this engine nozzle, points it like kind of like the opposite direction, and whips this tail end all the way around, and just, so it's coming in belly first, take your hand, and then just goes vertical. It just boosts itself around and lands. It's crazy. Like, they've already successfully landed one of them, so you might be able to go look at it. Go look at like SpaceX successful booster landing or something like that. You'll find it. It's a giant silver grain silo of a ship. It's hard to miss. It's real special. And actually taking a look at the footage here in the background, I say background, but you guys are all probably watching this pretty intently. It's all still going relatively fast. You saw I had a number of attempts, and I had a few successful ones that are kind of real close, but then they failed in the end. Something went wrong. But I have a good feeling about this one. I don't remember even if this actually is the one that ends up successfully going to orbit, but I believe it is. I figured what the biggest issue I find with so far with the FPS is that it really does not like the fairings. Now, I am still having some frame issues at the moment, even just doing this. However, it's a lot better getting rid of the fairings. And now, since at the moment they don't even have a heating, like a heating element to the atmosphere yet, like normally you start to burn up if you go through it too fast, either exiting or coming in at any speed. Although, relatively, this rocket wasn't going all that fast, and especially by the time I got up to the upper atmosphere, going that speed, it probably wouldn't have done anything. However, getting that nose cone, it did more than enough. It protected all the satellites. And at this point, I recognized that my fuel's about to run out on the cores. I'm out of the atmosphere. It's time to just kind of detach, let them all go, as they all explode behind me in a giant fireball. As my ship just kind of tumbles around. It is a strange looking one. I mean, look at that. It doesn't exactly look normal. And also remember that all this looks, even like this part right now, looks a little slow. As my chair squeaks in the background. I am sorry about that, DGDs. I am a professional YouTuber. But this all looks a little bit slow, but I can assure you that this is all on ×4 speed. So that's just, again, how long it took to really do some of this. It just does take a while. And even some of these parts are on time warp, but, it all works out pretty well enough. And yeah, so I'm kind of really liking this new system of just, I mean, this is maybe one of those scenarios where just because it took so long, like when they get these videos that are so long, I could just, build and play at my own leisure, and then just fast forward it to something 1/4 the speed, and then just kind of give you my commentary as we talk over, so I can just kind of, because I feel like I blabber on a lot, and that's easier to do. So it's easier to blabber on for 20 minutes instead of for an hour and a half, It's a lot simpler that way, and I know I can just keep on talking on and on and on. But, kind of back to the SpaceX topic, I know I'm going back and forth between topics, just taking a look. I mean, I'm trying to currently just kind of burn out all my fuel to really extend out my orbit. I'm trying to leave the orbit of Kerbin. So I'm just, get rid of all the fuel that I can, and I'll move on to the next stage and just kind of exhaust everything I can there and start taking a look at these satellites in a moment. But I know that recently SpaceX, they're doing a whole bunch of things. Like they just put a whole bunch of shrouds around like their launch mount to make sure that people can't like look at the pipes anymore. But it's not because of that, honestly. It's to protect them from the explosion of like the engines and keep them, protected from fragments that come up from the concrete and stuff like that. They just recently launched their version 2 Starlink satellites, which, funny enough, they're called minis, but they're actually bigger. Imagine like 2 Bluetooth speakers with like a smaller Bluetooth speaker in the center. They kind of look like drones almost, like circular drones. They look like 3 circular, like ovalish orb drones. But I guess supposedly they're a lot better. And they're nothing like what I'm releasing here, but I suppose similar in some concept, not really. But I'm launching these little tiny like satellite probes. This is going to be my satellite relays. You can see I just kind of launch them out, activate the solar panels, and they're good to go. They all have drone pods on, or they should be autonomously controlled. They all have satellite dishes on them, batteries, and they all have solar power, again. So they are golden. They should be perfectly fine to survive out here. They're not too far away from the star, so they should never run out of power. And even like the Starlink satellites, all of them are solar powered as well, floating around Earth, all like some like 5 to like 10,000 of them. I'm surprised that, honestly, you feel like you would run out of space in space, which I suppose you do a little bit, but like, turns out there's a lot of space in space. And when you think of a satellite, you have to realize though that these satellites are tiny. Like in Kerbal, they're kind of big, but in real life, sometimes a satellite could be nothing more than something that is a couple of inches, you know, across in each direction. You know, a micro satellite. Sometimes, and they know that in like 5 to 10 years, they're going to come back into the atmosphere and burn up because they're tiny little things or whatever. You know, a lot of satellites sometimes do that. You forget that sometimes a lot of those meteorites that you see up in the sky sometimes aren't even fallen meteorites or shooting stars. They are actually just... Hang on, so here in the background, I realized that my second stage got stuck, so I just spun it off in desperation, and it worked. It worked, so don't fault me for that. But, oh, I don't even remember what I was talking about now. See, this is what I do to myself, DGDs. I can't even finish the thought. But I was just gonna go back to the idea that this is where I realized that these boosters were terrible. But this is also where I misunderstood the boosters, because I thought I ran out of fuel. But what I realized is that I ran out of electrical charge. Is that these things have fuel that lasts almost like forever. Like honestly, it's taken forever to go through this fuel. You'd be surprised later on at how much I have to go through to even run out of this stuff. What I was running out of is electrical charge. It's actually using electrical charge to help push this. So I could see it being super helpful if you had like a very, very baby satellite or like a baby lander can, like one fuel tank, a thruster, and a lander can with like a baby RCS, you know, stability thruster thing on it, and you're golden. You know, put on a couple of landing legs and you're good. Maybe that... Ooh, it's thundering outside. I don't know if that came through in the recording or not. But maybe that could be useful for like asteroid landing, because I know in KSP 1 there are asteroids and comets and stuff that you can land on. There are also some moons around the gas giants, around Jewel and stuff, that I believe are very, very light on the gravity. Like you could just almost fall off of it. Even like Minimus around Kerbin's gravity is very light, so you could probably land with one of these. And that might be something to try in the future. Instead of building this giant rocket, why don't we maybe next time let's go actually take a look at our second moon, Minimus. Everyone knows about a moon. Everyone knows about Earth, you know, Kerbin. But not a lot of people necessarily visit Minimus and do a whole lot there. So, you know, we can go there, hop around, take a look, and see what's going on. Explore how it looks now from a distance, because the graphics are looking amazing in this game. And I'm surprised by how well everything looks. But, you know, I heard that it looks amazing kind of like when you're in high orbit, which I guess it does. It looks amazing, but when you get actually down to the surface, it still just kind of looks like KSP 1, where it's just like a flat plane of like nothingness. But probably gonna be the 1,000th time you hear me say early access. You know, I may as well just say EA, but then that's gonna get confusing with EA, and EA is also notorious for their terrible early access stuff. But hey, you know, thank you for watching this video, DGD. If you find yourselves coming back and looking at more of these videos to watch me just ramble on about the stupidest things, then feel free to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. Off the black screen, that's how good of a YouTuber I am. I didn't time this ending correctly, because you know why? I still don't know how to do outros. And I think that's gonna end up being my outro, because I still don't know how to do outros. So, thank you, DGDs, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.